Hey guys, so here we are. O'Neill JKD channel. As you can see, we're super professional about everything here with all the stuff around the room, and we tried to clean things up around here a little bit. In fact, I wanted my phone to quit making noise, and it had other ideas. So to not annoy you guys, I'm going to turn this thing off. And that'll put the whammy on it. That's one way to make sure it's not squawking. Okay, there we go. So haven't done any of this in a while, so we're overdue. Plus, there's a guy that is standing here. He's sitting actually. This is Bruce Halbach. Bruce is another one of the old St. Louis guys, and when we say old, we mean it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Bruce is one of the old St. Louis JKD guys too, and gosh, there's this little core here. But Bruce kind of came along a little bit after the original East St. Louis group. He was a few years after that. He wasn't part of that, but he's kind of the in-between from that group and then the other groups that started to develop after that. So Bruce grew up where? You grew up right here in Richmond Heights.
Yeah.
Yeah, he grew up here in Richmond Heights. And I'm going to let Bruce talk to you a little bit first about his background, what got him started in martial arts and what he started in, and then take us, Bruce, up to the time of you discovering JKD, how that happened and what got you started there.
Okay, great. I started in 73 in an art called Kaji Kimbo. It was offered free at a church. I started taking it, fell in love with the martial arts, went from 1 day a week to 5 days a week. Did that all the way till 77 or 78 when I saw an ad for in a Black Belt magazine for Danny Inosanto teaching JKD and Filipino martial arts in Aspen, Colorado. It was Aspen Academy. Bob Dugan ran it. I went up there for 2 weeks to train. Fell in love with the stick work even more. While I was there, I was able to take private lessons with Jeff Amata.
Hold on a minute. So when you were at Aspen in 73, and I remember this now.
No, that would have been like 77 or 78.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
Okay, 73 was, Kaji Kembo was in 73.
Yeah.
When you went to Aspen was what year again?
77 or 78.
And there was already stick work going on there?
Danny was teaching FMA.
Already?
Yes.
That far back?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
So yeah, would have been, I'm gonna guess probably 78.
Okay, that's interesting info, yeah.
So I took the class with him, which was like 3 hours in the morning.
And by the way, for you guys that don't know, FMA means Filipino Martial Arts.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out more and more for you guys that don't already know. There's an extreme link between these two because Dan was a very, I guess technically, I can't remember from the Matt Polly book, the big biography. I think Dan was considered the senior most of Bruce's students, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
And I know he was the one in charge of, Bruce wanted him in charge of trying to get the other instructors to do A, B, C, D, E, F,
I believe you're right.
Yeah, I think we got that part. Anyway,
Yeah.
so go ahead. So the FMA.
Yep, and my lunch hour and dinner hour, I actually spent doing private lessons with Jeff Amata, who was
Sure.
under Danny at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Came back to St. Louis, couldn't wait to show my Kaji Kimbo instructors what I had learned. Absolutely fell in love with it. It already made what I do better. Made the Kaji Kimbo, the art, more understandable, made it more functional. When I came back in 78, 79, I met Nate Defensor out of Chicago, who did the Filipino martial arts.
Well, I didn't know you knew Nate that far back.
79 or 80.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know you knew him that long. Okay.
I brought Nate down to St. Louis at that time to do a seminar at the school. So we really brought the first Filipino seminar here to St. Louis.
So you did it years before CMAA even.
Yes.
Damn,
Yes.
This is all new information to me too.
So we brought Nate down. Nate did the seminar. It was fantastic. I then somehow met Jay, and I think Jay was going to Bob Dugan's Academy in Aspen.
Yes.
And he wanted
Yes.
to know some patterns before he went. So I taught him 6 counts, so he was able to go up there and already have some of the groundwork. He came back. When he came back, I think that's when we met.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And I had the school, and I was gonna close the school, and at that point, Jay was going to open CMAA.
Mhm.
And from there, we then met Jimmy Tacosa,
Wait, let's tell them what CMAA means.
California Martial Arts Academy.
And Jay started it as, he got the idea, I guess, from the Aspen Academy
Yes.
idea. He
Yeah.
started it out in California on the University of California Irvine
Yeah.
campus in the early 80s. And Jay's from here in St. Louis. You know, we're from here in St. Louis. Turned out that I'll interject this because it'll connect this for us. My fiance at the time was a probation officer, and so was Jay D'Amato's cousin, Joyce. That was her name. And the two of them were talking one day about, you know, what's your fiance? Oh, he does this Jeet Kune Do stuff. And, oh, well, my cousin Jay does it. Said, what? What? So they introduced Jay and I to each other. And at the time, I was working at St. Louis University full time. And Stan Brooks, who was a few years before me and JKD in our group, was a caseworker near the St. Louis U campus. He rented space in a dance studio right on Grand, real close to the SLU campus. And that's where Jay came walking in one night, and that connected us.
Okay.
And that led to,
I think Jay connected me to you
yes,
at the school, and that's how we met.
that's how we met then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
These backstories
Yeah,
happen sometime. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and then we had the opportunity to do a seminar with Jimmy Tacosa, again, fell in love with the Serrata.
When did Jimmy pop in the picture?
Jimmy popped in when we all went up to Chicago to train with him and Angel.
For what year?
And I can't remember what year that
Well,
was.
was it still before?
No, we had CMAA. CMAA
Okay.
was at that time.
So when we say CMA, what we didn't tell you is that it started in Irvine, but after we all connected, I remember Jay D'Amato's sister Janice, who was the administrator, saying, well, you know, we get more people coming from the East Coast and the Midwest out to the California campus.
Right.
And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm an administrator at St. Louis U, and we have all these empty conference rooms and stuff. Why don't we have it here in St. Louis?
Yeah.
And we did, and it was very successful.
And was that 82 or 83?
That was 84.
Was it 84?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's when Jay got the idea, you know, I think, why don't we just have a school here?
Right.
And Bruce had a school, and he wanted.
I was closing.
He was closing it, so Jay took the space.
Yeah. He actually bought the school. He actually bought all the equipment.
He bought the equipment,
everything,
and that old boxing ring was even still in it.
The old boxing ring.
Oh my God, yeah. So that's how CMAA ended up here, because it was in California. It wasn't just a cute name.
Right.
And the name had recognition, because Jay used to do full-time ads in Black Belt magazine for these camps.
Right.
So people knew what it was. So from a branding and marketing perspective, that's why the name came.
They knew what it was,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
And honestly, at that point, I moved away, but wherever I moved, I found somebody to train with the Filipino Arts. And I just kept training.
Well, let's back up though. There's a lot that happened before you moved away, because you were here for some time.
It would have been right after Jay kind of opened the school. I was only here another year with the school.
Yeah, but how about your time working down the street, running a store, the martial arts store?
It was still only about a year or so.
Come on, it had to be more than a year.
You know.
That was longer than a year. See what happens when you get old, you don't remember.
We don't remember that stuff, because Jay bought this after we built the school.
Yeah.
And you and I did a lot of the construction work.
Yes, we
with
did, yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah.
And the school opened. I was teaching at night, you were running the school,
Mm-hmm.
and I was down the street with the store during the day.
Yeah, and I was at the school doing day classes
Right.
and the other night classes.
Right.
And then you came up and did yours, and you were still doing Kaji
Kaji
Kembo.
Kembo for the kids and that.
Yeah.
At that time.
Right.
And at that point, I ended up, it was about a year. I was not there for 2 or 3 years.
Well, the part I don't get about that is, I mean, when did we finally start bringing Dan and Inosanto to the school to do the seminars in the summer? That was like, had to be 1980.
It may have been, if it was 84 when the last.
No,
game
it was after that. No, it was 85 at the earliest. It might have even been
Yeah.
86 before it
Yeah,
started. But, and you were around for all that.
I was there for that, but after I left, Dan had not been back because there was the falling out.
Yeah. Okay. So,
So-
yeah, I didn't realize you left that soon. I was thinking
You
you
know.
were around for at least 2 years.
No, because I thought I was originally gonna come back every other week and teach, and it just wasn't gonna work out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that kind of gives you guys some backgrounds on how all this stuff kind of went around. And so, let's see. We're trying to stay focused more on the JKD aspect since that's what this channel is. Because the Kaji Kembo story is fascinating in itself. And that's a, see, you know, it's funny, the whole JKD thing, right? There's other guys here in St. Louis that say they're doing JKD. Well, from what I've seen and from sending spies over the years now and then, what I've gathered is, and unless it's changed in the last few years, none of them are really doing JKD. They're really doing Jun Fan Kickboxing. Now, whether or not they would call it that if they could is another story, because what I'm told is that there was a lawsuit and Dan Inosanto wasn't allowed to use Jun Fan Kickboxing, which would be more specific to what most so-called JKD instructors are teaching. And the reason I say so-called is people confuse the two. Jun Fan Kickboxing was Bruce Lee's personal style. And a big part of that was more what he was doing earlier on, like when he was in the movies and all. I mean, it really dramatically evolved and changed a lot, especially during the last few years he was alive.
but
So-
that originally is what it was supposed to do. Each person should evolve.
Well, that's what JKD means.
Yeah.
You know, JKD is a conceptual framework for how to integrate and synthesize aspects of other martial arts that fit you as an individual martial artist and create your own approach to it using those concepts, right? But what most so-called JKD guys are doing is they're mimicking what Bruce was doing, especially back in the 60s with the Jun Fan Kickboxing, and they're trying to you know, turn that into a style.
Well, I think they're trying to turn it into a system. Here's your belt, here's your rank, you're this blue belt,
Sure.
you're this black belt in JKD, you're whatever. Your JKD should not look like mine.
Bingo.
And your JKD is gonna come from different arts than my JKD.
Here you go.
My JKD comes from the structure of the Filipino arts. And that's how I get it put together for myself. Yours may come from somewhere else. But when you see everybody with JKD, if all the students are looking the same, I think something's wrong.
Well, yeah, you're back to you've done exactly what Bruce said. What was the phrase? The classical mess. He didn't want stuff to be locked in stone because life's not locked in stone. In life, you succeed better when you learn how to flow, you learn how to evolve, and you learn how to adapt to change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what JKD is supposed to be, right? So real JKD, I mean, you know, really, if someone takes, I mean, there's a lot of Aikido influence in mine, you know, but what did I do? See, staying within JKD concepts, what I did with Aikido is I cut a lot of it way down. I made it more economical. It fits in with centerline trapping. It's, you know, that's what distinguishes JKD is when people modify things to make it more efficient and to make it work for them. That's when they're doing JKD, not just mimicking Bruce's old kickboxing style, which is still what I mostly see.
Not trap, lop style, pock style, and then whatever other word they know to put it in there. Everybody should look different. Again, if you see everybody doing the same thing, it's not the true art.
Yeah, you're just repeating, you're showing what now, and see, people get confused too, because Dan Inosanto used to tell us, because we trained a lot with him. You know, we used to have private classes with him. That's what kicked off my channel, is I put up 6 hours of that from back in the 80s. And we spent a lot of time with him. And, you know, his thing was, look, I'm here to show you guys, to present to you what I've learned and what was presented to me.
Yeah.
So in that process, he went through what he originally did with Bruce, which was the Jun Fan Kickboxing, and did those drills, showed a lot of that, showed various, numerous Filipino martial arts and how those worked and what was done there. But his thing was, look, he always told us this: if you're a JKD guy, you got to take what works for you. You've got to synthesize it. You got to take the parts that you like, get rid of the stuff that you don't like because it doesn't fit your body or your mentality. Then you're a JKD man. But Dan was teaching that conceptually,
Yes.
which is how Bruce taught it.
Yeah.
But people would come to this stuff and they didn't do their homework. They didn't do the reading. They didn't listen to what Dan would say a lot. And it's like, this really isn't a JKD seminar. I'm going to explain JKD. I'll show Jun Fan Kickboxing. I'll show Lacoste style.
Yeah.
You know, Filipino will do Muay Thai.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to do straight boxing, you know. But yeah, that wasn't JKD. See, so that was an introduction. And a lot of people got confused by this. And like Bruce said, they wanted to turn so-called JKD into another style. And if they wanted to do that, it's more appropriate to really do it more with the Jun Fan Kickboxing, because
Right. If you're gonna,
it was more stylistic in the way Bruce was beginning to combine things. And then he himself moved way past that. And you don't see that. You don't see that in the movies. You'd have to have known him back then, or people that knew him that were training with him for maybe the last 3 years of his life. It changed dramatically.
and think of where it's, we've done this for 50 some years, both of us.
Yes.
Your Filipino arts came from a different spot than mine did.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we both have gotten kind of to the same direct point of going, I'm throwing all this away. I
A lot
like
of
this,
it,
I
yeah.
like this, and we
Mhm.
kind of had ended up at the same spot. We just from a different direction.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Yeah, good point. Yeah.
It's not just taking and learning this art, this art, this art, and putting them together. You got to know what to throw away for yourself. You have to know what to keep.
Well, that's the JKD process. You know, you gradually whittle away. You know, it's like taking a lump of clay, right?
Yeah.
You start sculpting and you get it down to something that's a representation of what you're trying to do, or you've created something new.
And for me, I get another lump of clay.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
me too. I mean, I went in
Yeah.
the whole systemic direction 13 years ago, and
Yeah.
there's a lump of clay. I won't talk about that right now because this is about the JKD part, but I will say this. As soon as I started doing Systema, I said, this is JKD.
Yep.
I mean, they've already synthesized and integrated stuff from so many arts, but they've been doing it for centuries. Bruce had a few years. So just to throw that out there. So, okay, so we talked a little bit already about how the whole California martial arts thing happened and ended up here in Maplewood. So that was where our core, Maplewood, Missouri is right next door to Richmond Heights here. It's
Yeah.
literally about 200 feet down the street from me is where it starts. So I still live in that neighborhood, the area where we did all this back in the 80s when we had this big school that had all these arts under one roof.
Yeah.
So Bruce, while you were still here, at CMAA, we'll set the Kaji Kembo aside for a minute, like we did.
Before you do.
Yes.
Let's say this, since we backed up and I said that Nate was the
Yes.
first one to do a seminar here. Before Jay bought the school, the Kaji Kembo school, we were the first ones to run a full contact stick tournament in St. Louis.
Yeah, but that's, in FMA.
Yeah, and that was in FMA, but it was interesting to see what it brought. To
What
the
year do you
area.
think, roughly?
81, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I forgot about all that. I'm
Because-
sure I knew it
yeah.
at the time, but I don't remember all that. That's interesting. Yeah, that kind of comes back. So here again, you see, Bruce said it himself a little while ago. So he has still very consciously practiced applying the Jeet Kune Do, which is a conceptual framework. It's not a style,
Yeah,
but you can already see in what he said, he's applied that, how he's approached Filipino martial arts.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
since this is a JKD channel, let's talk about that. So your expression of JKD being, you went more the FMA direction. Can you specifically kind of explain from a Jeet Kune Do concepts idea what that did for you, and as far as how you integrated consciously things you integrated and where that's brought you up to now?
For me, I would say footwork. You have to understand footwork. You can't be stagnant. You can't stay stationary. You have to take the techniques that you learn along with the footwork, and they have to match up with your body movements. You can't say, I'm going to step to the left, oh, my body's going to the right. You have to put it together. I think you have to put the repetition together on the movements to understand it. Whether it's footwork or it's empty hand techniques. And you have to, in my opinion, break the techniques down to see what the core principles are of that technique. When you get that core principle, then you find out that the technique's not as important as the principle to do that technique. And because your technique will change over time as you get older. They say you train today for 10 years from now. And it's really true. If I am practicing a technique and it never changes, it never adapts, I never try to understand it, look at what's the true principle behind the technique, I'm not going to go anywhere with it. I'm not going to make it effective, in my opinion.
Well, you just keep repeating the pattern.
Yeah.
I got to ask you this question because it fits in perfectly here. And some of these guys that will watch this eventually or have probably seen this. You must have this. It's a DVD. I got it in the closet over there. I think it's called The Bladed Hand. The one that was made by a Filipino anthropologist who was often considered to be like the world's leading expert on all the different Filipino systems in the Philippines. Are you aware of this?
I think it's been sent to me. I can't remember.
You
I don't remember.
really
Okay.
watch this because it speaks to what you're talking about. And what we're talking about in general here about what's JKD and what's kind of not. All right.
Right.
So you have all these systems of everything. This is true of any martial art, no matter what culture it came from, right? Same thing in the Philippines. There's the Moro Islands, the Muslim islands, and the way things develop there are a lot different than the way they developed in other parts of the Philippines, okay? Because a lot of these arts came about at different times, somewhat different purposes.
Yeah.
There were the islands that were more directly affected by the Spaniards showing up, trying to conquer these specific islands using advanced bladed weapons that didn't exist in the Philippines. They were more crude. They were combining a short sword in one hand with a dagger in the other and using that. They had body armor. So the Filipino warriors that clashed with that had a different experience than other ones that were just fighting amongst themselves and within tribes. So all over the archipelago of the Philippines, which I think there's a total of 7,000 islands, including a lot of little uninhabited. I think 7,000. Yeah. So think about all that, okay? And think about how when your art, you're mostly fighting against other guys in the same art.
Yeah, absolutely.
What happens there? Well, styles get created.
Right.
And if one guy is bigger or stronger and he's more powerful than you are, but you're basically doing the same art, what's likely to happen there?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, what do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, well, they're gonna have to find a new way. They're gonna have to find a different way
They're gonna
to
have
do
to
it.
find
They're
a new
gonna
way.
have to create something else. And to me, that's always been the downside with with martial arts. If you're taking this art, you're learning to fight against the guy who does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with JKD, when people train, a lot of times we go, okay, you're gonna kick. You gotta box. Okay, you gotta box, you gotta wrestle. You gotta figure out a way to get past that movement.
Bingo. You have to adapt. The art has to be able to adapt, right? So if it's too strict of a style, right, then you run into a problem. Now, this is so interestingly portrayed when this anthropologist went all over the Philippines and he shows these different arts. Some of them I still have never heard of to this day, that anybody who's done them. But what you see some of them have the most elaborate patterns.
Yes.
And you go, oh my God, how many years did it take these guys to learn how to, and you'll watch them and they're going through these patterns. And I mean, it is really cool to watch. Now, here's where it gets fascinating though. Then these guys will go and they put on head protector, groin, chest, they might, shin protectors and stuff, hand especially, right? And arm stuff. Now they get out there and they go at it. And now it's a fight, all right? Well, what I noticed watching this is, and some of these guys are really
the same thing I know.
Yeah, you're watching this and you're like, you watch all these different fights, and mostly what you see is probably 90 to 95% of those patterns are non-existent.
Never used.
Never happen in the exchange.
Yeah.
And you go, that's curious. A few times there were a couple guys that things happened just right and they ended up in the pattern because they have the muscle memory for the pattern. But most of the time, none of that was there. It was even as advanced as they were, things were on a much more simple, direct, economical level as far as what actually happened.
Yeah, simple, direct, to the point. I will say the downside on it is they were just trading shots. Sometimes they didn't even worry about blocking. They were just trading shots back and forth.
Yeah, it just happens because their emotions get involved and all these other things happen. And before you know it, and now this is how this goes back to the story of Leo Gahi Jr. and Pakiti Tersha and Tom Bizio from New York. And obviously Leo knew this because my understanding is that the way he trained Tom is he hung a couple of car tires on a rope and they used a heavier, like a 30-inch. We used to, in Pakiti, we had a 30-inch baton that was 1 inch in diameter. Now that was a baton meant to be used as a baton because a lot of the arts, the Filipino arts, the baton is lighter and thinner because it's just a training version of using an edged weapon.
Correct.
So it's a lot different.
Yeah.
So this was a baton meant to be used as a baton, and it's a stick fighting tournament. Stick fighting tournament.
Yeah.
So Leo knew, like, half these guys, the way they do stuff, since they can't actually cut somebody, they're going to get their brains beat out because this guy's using a heavy club compared to what they're using.
And he's trained on a tire, which just has no give, give whatsoever.
Right. So he's strong, and he's not reaching out, but he's stepping in really close with this really tight. It's like a half of a V. That collapses through your arm, through your stick, and bashes you in the head.
Pushes it all in.
Shoves it all in and collapses it into you. And Leo knew all this, and he's like, And Tom won. He beat guys from all these different styles because what he did was really, really simple. What Leo did was a study of what these other styles are doing because they're still practicing in a way that's based on their stick, not really being used so much as a stick as much as it's being used as a blade. Practice blade. And now that was a very tactical Jeet Kune Do mentality that Leo used in realizing, like, simple, direct, with tons of repetition are going to cut off whatever happens.
Think of 5 3-minute rounds on a tire. Just
oh my God,
how strong you're going to get, how hard you're going to
and how many times you pass out doing that. It's that to me was like the stick training version of Muay Thai. Total brutal but super. It's effective because of the level of conditioning. The level of commitment, the total confidence that you have in what you're doing. And so it's back to that, see? So, but now let's go the other direction for a minute. So all these arts have these elaborate patterns, Now, that does create certain attributes.
It does, yes,
Okay. It does, when it's built into the system, you learn how to change ranges,
right,
you learn how to flow. But the problem comes in when you don't get out of those patterns
correct,
and see and do a JKD process with those patterns like Bruce has been
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
And look at, okay, well, what did I get from the pattern I just did for the last year? What comes out of that I see that I can actually use when I do a freestyle fight and test it? It's back to what everybody likes to use the phrase pressure testing.
yeah, yeah. I agree, I think you do a pattern, it doesn't matter what pattern it is, if you can't break out of that pattern, you're stuck. Because the pattern is to teach you to drill, muscle memory,
Mhm,
speed, timing, footwork.
mhm.
If you take that pattern and never leave it, all you have is the pattern.
Yeah.
But if you take a basic 6 count pattern, and some of you may know what it is, a person should be able to come at you with a stick and you should be able to flow with whatever strike comes in. And each time you do it, it should get harder and harder. You should also be able to take those sticks out of your hands and still deal with it against boxing or deal with it against a knife. If you're not doing that, then it's not becoming a JKD process of where I go with this. And you go, oh, I can't do 6 count that way. What am I doing wrong? Or maybe it's just, I've trained the pattern incorrectly. I've just done a pattern. I haven't tried to figure out how to make it functional.
Yeah, how to break out of it. Yeah. So there you go. So in essence, this is the thing we see in a lot of arts these days, I look at it, this hit me in the last couple of years that, the Civil War reenactment guys that wear the
Yeah.
uniforms and they go to painstaking lengths to reenact these battles and all this stuff. And I look at a lot of traditional martial arts, that's what they're doing. They're reenacting the way the samurai fought, back in the 1400s, or
Right.
they're reenacting the way their Okinawan karate was 300 years ago, mostly being used against other guys doing the same kind of thing because that's all that existed in that part of the world
Right.
at the time. You can't fault them for what existed back then, right?
Right.
But then when you take these things out of the historical periods that they were created in and you bring them to now, and that's what you're trying to train for the modern world on the street, it's like, well, maybe you ought to set your samurai sword down once in a while and pick up a handgun, pick up a shotgun,
Right.
pick up a knife,
Yeah,
pick up a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Because that's what people use now. They're not using this. So the sword can still develop attributes, but you need to adapt it. And that's the point we're trying to make is don't confuse a style, a martial style,
Yeah.
that perhaps you're pursuing for fitness and health,
enjoying, just general
pure
enjoyment.
enjoyment. And assume that that's preparing you for what, because if you've never been in fights or been around stuff, and all you've ever seen is this and
Never been punched.
never been punched, you don't, how are you gonna know? You
Right.
won't know. You'll stay within that framework. And really, the JKD thing's about combat efficiency, It also has deep layers of, I don't want to use the word esoteric, but let's say internal aspects of training that bridge into your spirituality, That's the other part that a lot of people aren't that aware of. I mean, a lot of them, most people by now, if they study Bruce Lee at all, they know that the JKD, a huge part of how JKD developed was the fact that Bruce was a philosopher, man. He was a philosophy major in
Yeah.
college. And the philosophy that he studied, particularly the Chinese Taoism, which is a philosophy based on trying to live your life the way things work in nature and how to flow with things and how to adapt and change and evolve and be one with all that, So all these things influence the creation of the whole JKD principle. But mainly what my goal was with getting Bruce in here is a lot of folks don't realize, because Bruce wasn't around, didn't stay around here as long and came back in more recent years. But he's one of the original guys that got introduced to this.
Yeah.
And he's done his own thing with it. And here again, his is more FMA oriented. But I wish you guys out there that are actually training, Dwight Woods, who's been running the JKD school down in Miami for years. He was he was my roommate when I went out to California
At Irvine.
to go, yeah, in Irvine to directly do CMAA with Jay. And that was after I'd already been in JKD since, well, I started it
In the early 70s.
yeah, I started it in, I think it was the fall of 73 when I met Stan. And I started in 1969. I wrestled for a while. Then I went into Okinawan karate, Japanese karate, Taekwondo. And then I met Stan in JKD in 73. And then by 75, Mike Salmon, our head instructor, told me to go ahead and start teaching in 75. So there's all that stuff just to get it perspective on your years of how long we've been doing these things, So Bruce, anything else you can think of that you just want to throw out there?
The only thing that I would say is that when looking at the JKD, when I moved away, I always found somebody new to study with, to train with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from Filipino Arts to kickboxing, wherever I lived. So I was always very fortunate.
Oh, wait, you even trained with them. What's that gal's name?
I trained with Kathy Long.
Kathy Long. God, yeah, right.
I trained with her in Bakersfield when I lived out there.
That's right.
I trained with a gentleman in Derobio Eskrima who opened my eyes to another aspect of.
Was that out in California?
That was in New Mexico.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew about this
And
one.
so I was very fortunate to train with all these people and then be able to sit back and go, how does this work with what I already know? What would I keep? What would I throw away? What would I continue to practice?
JKD again, right?
Again,
right?
it's back to the principle of,
right.
I got to throw stuff away if I found something else that's more functional, more effective for me. So that's the biggest thing is I didn't stop training when I left St. Louis. I was just training in other aspects.
Yeah.
And it was being wise enough, I guess, to go, I'm gonna train with this guy. I'm gonna train with this guy. I'm gonna train with this person. And so that really made a difference.
Well, and see, that's why this is still JKD, right? If Bruce didn't have JKD mentality, because what a lot of guys in a lot of these arts will do is they're like, oh no, this one's the best or this or that. Oh no, you don't want to go out and mess because they're afraid they're going to lose a student to something else. He walked in with an open mind. He had these JKD concepts in his head from way back, right? So he's applied that. Plus, just think of, even if you would still consider yourself mainly a Serrata, right?
Yeah. That's what I fell in love with from Nate Defensor, correct?
But what makes you Serrata really strong is he's tested that against kickboxing. He's tested that against other Filipino systems. And I guarantee you his probably looks somewhat different than some of the other guys because he's done that, but it also gives him more freedom and flexibility within the art that he chooses to stay in because he's approached it with the JKD mentality.
And for me, I like it works. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
It fits my body style. It fits me. But yeah, without the it's interesting if you think about it back for the JKD for all of us. If you hadn't have been in it, Jay hadn't have been interested in it. I had not trained with Danny in Aspen. None of us would have ever gotten together. It all would have been, I'm doing Shotokan or I'm doing Taekwondo or I'm doing Kajikembo. And we all would have been in our own little arts, just doing our thing.
Yeah. Which is okay, but it's not, this is so much more expansive and broadening and
inclusive with it, what you can actually learn.
Right.
So much to learn.
That's right. So,
and I think we found out you've gone a different path. I've gone a different path. My one instructor, Alan Carter, went a different path.
Yes.
And we're all kind of going up that mountain.
Yeah.
And we've all gotten to the same conclusion.
It adds to the same peak, though. It goes to the same peak eventually, doesn't it? Yeah.
It took me a while to go around the mountain, but I feel like I'm getting there with it. And you find out it's all the same. I think we were talking about that earlier with like when you said the Sistema. That was here before JKD.
And I look at it as the most evolved JKD there is. See, and it's back to that again because really what we're talking about here, and I'm glad you just triggered me. I look at it this way, and I have for years. You have martial artists, which is what we're talking about, and you have martial stylists. You have guys that pick just a style.
Yeah.
Don't ever go outside of that style. And that's all they choose to do, and that's okay. So you got to look at somebody like Bruce is he's both, but he's both in the best way. Because even though he's chosen more one style, he's expanded that style based on going out of the style, investigating others to see how to make his adaptable, right? So that he can stay within that style, but he can do things in that style that other guys, I'm sure, can't, who never went outside of it to see, well, what happens when I try the empty hand version of my style with a kickboxer? What happens when I try it with the box? Like you just mentioned earlier. See, so that's the beauty of being a true martial artist is you investigate and you, because really when you think about it, a lot of the martial arts that develop, Aikido is a prime example of this. So is system of, in Aikido, the founder of that art trained in dozens and dozens and dozens of other arts. His Aikido was his personal expression of the level that he reached later in his life, okay? And the biggest problem with it is most of the other guys doing it couldn't do what he did. They weren't at that level, okay? And it's hard to get to that level in that art because you didn't go through all the other training like Bruce is talking about that brought you to a point where the expression of his Aikido is it's using universal principles that are in all martial arts. Right. It's using them in a highly effective and in a highly efficient way. Yeah. He can do it in 1/10 the time that it takes you to do it. He can move really slow while you're going really fast and still dump you on your noodle, right? So this is what all arts should lead you to, right? Is these abilities, but they're all based on the same principles, and each person's personal expression of it comes out unique to them. And that's why you have these arts, because so many of these guys in Chinese arts did this. So many guys in Japanese arts did this. The Russians have been doing it forever. They've been integrating things forever, and that's what Sistema is. And that's there again, that's a martial artist, right? You're not just trying to copy one thing and stay in this little narrow box.
Here's where I'll add to you on the JKD with that.
Okay.
Is, now I forget how I wanted to say it. The instructor, any gentleman who Lee went and did all these other things to develop, develop JKD.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, it's up to the teacher who's had the opportunity to do that. Like you, me, Jay, when he was alive, Stan.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's going to have that opportunity to go train in 20 arts.
That's true.
So it is up to us as open-minded, wise JKD, in theory, instructors to make a student understand that on the mental level. So they walk away and go, I'm not understanding the technique, but I have to understand how I have to make this work for me. And I think that's real important, that not everybody gets the opportunity to go train in 5 or 6 arts.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's up to us as instructors to somehow get that across to that person because of what arts we've done. Yeah. To explain that to the student. And I don't think that happens in all JKD.
Oh, no.
It's broken down to here's a technique, here's a technique, here's a technique.
Yeah, a lot of
you got to understand how I got it there.
Or a lot of the JKD schools, a lot of them, my understanding is from what I see when I look at videos and I talk to people that go to them, they're doing more what Dan and Inosanto did in the seminars. And that is they're showing these different arts or parts of these different arts. Or if they're just doing JKD, what I mostly see when I look at it is I see, okay, these guys are doing the Jun Fan Kickboxing. I still see the same basic drills that have been around forever. Hopefully they're being at least creative enough to come out of that.
To make new drills.
Yeah, that's good. And that shows some JKD applied. But when I look at the body mechanics and I look at the techniques, more often than not, what I still see is a lot of guys mimicking or reproducing Bruce's old Jun Fan Kickboxing, and because they're even, I'll tell you, a guy who has done that at a brilliant level. He's a UK guy, Tommy Carruthers. You ever seen this guy?
I've heard the name.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
Yeah.
If you look at this guy, you'll go, oh no, that's what they call in metaphysical terms, a walk-in. Bruce Lee's spirit has entered this guy's body. That guy's body mechanics, that guy's movement, that guy's everything is so close to Bruce like I've never seen. And that's something in itself. It's actually pretty fascinating, and I give the guy credit for that. But from what I've seen and listened to him talk, he's one narrow-minded dude. He's talented as hell.
Yeah.
But he's really narrow-minded, you know, and that's the epitome of mimicry of Bruce. Can the guy fight? Hell yeah, he can fight. Okay. But from being a well-rounded martial arts perspective, I've heard him say things that I can say this because I've listened to him talk are extremely narrow focused and narrow-minded. He's one of these guys that'll put down other arts, which makes him totally full of shit as far as I'm considered, if he hasn't gone and put his foot on the mat and tried him and go, oh, now I understand why they're doing this. You know, what the guy down in Florida, the MMA guy, his YouTube channel's Inside Fighting. He listened to all these other guys putting Systema down, and he's like, well, I don't know. I'm looking at things here going, I don't know what they're doing, but So what did he do? He traveled up to see Vladimir in Toronto. He got on there. He's like, he came back saying, oh, I never been hit like this before. Wow, this is another guy, Sensei Seth, has a channel. He went to North Carolina to Glenn Murphy, and he stepped in there too, and he's like, holy shit, you know. So when you say stuff like that, you don't have credibility. It just shows you're narrow-minded. It shows you're not a real JKD man because you haven't gotten out there and said, okay, really? Well, let's see what they're doing, and let's see how that affects what I'm doing.
Well, I think a lot of people nowadays look at stuff on video and watch it and go, well, I can't get it. That's not gonna work.
Yeah.
But then when you feel it.
Feel is the word.
The
Feel.
energy, you have to go, okay, so can you show me the punch? Can I throw a punch? You defend it so I can see what that movement is doing, what it feels like.
There you go.
And then you have a right to go, oh, that makes sense to me now. Now I get it. I can't look at it and go, oh, no, that's a silly movement they're doing. Now, I can say I can look at a movement and go, boy, that looks really wide. And if that's coming in full speed, I don't see how they're gonna do it. You know, and then you have to ask questions.
Yeah, you got to put it in perspective, because you got to remember too, people look at clips of stuff and they see something happening in context with one little thing, right? The one of the things we'll get criticized for a lot is it's like, well, you guys train slow a lot. I got a guy in class now, 30 years in martial arts, hardcore karate, and he's doing GAT.
Yeah,
the Filipino system with Tim Rivera.
Yeah.
And he's done a fair amount of Sarada too. I forgot who the guy's name is. I've never heard of him. And he walks in here kind of like, I think I see some stuff in here that looks really interesting, but I don't know. So at first he's very skeptical. Then he said, and he's doing like you explained, he'll see this and he'll go, oh, yeah, you're moving really slow and this and that. And I don't get why. And I'm like, well, if you can't do it slow, you can't do it fast.
Bingo.
That's half of why we do that.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to see where the opening is. Because remember, we're not coming from a technique perspective. We're always coming from a more open perspective of, I'm not sure what he's going to do.
Yeah. Where's the connection being made?
Yeah.
Because where that connection is made is going to change what you do.
So you flow through things and you learn how to understand principles, and then you speed it up. And then what gets really interesting is, like with this new guy, he'll notice he can do things at full speed, and some of us don't have to go even close to half speed.
Yeah.
And can still defend that. Now, why is that?
Well, my opinion is because you've done it slow and you've watched it, your eyes see things that when you do it fast, you don't ever see them. And if you always do it at a fast speed, you never see where it goes.
Bingo.
If you do it slow, you go, oh, there's the movement, there's the movement, there's the movement, and you start to understand.
And your brain's taking snapshots.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it's feeding those snapshots through neural pathways to muscular pathways. And all this stuff is in your body, and you're able to do it more efficiently because you did it slow enough to understand and break things down. And then you don't even have to go as fast, which is handy for us old guys.
Because we can't.
we can't go as fast sometimes, you know. So there you go. Well, hey, Bruce, I guess we could go on all day, but I don't want to take up your whole day. And hopefully now you guys, you know, in the JKD community to watch a lot of this stuff, realize there's another guy here. And I wanted you to get Bruce's perspective and realize that there's a little hub of folks here in St. Louis that go way back in in the whole JKD approach, you know, with direct connections to the original JKD through the Dan and Inosanto route. And I wanted to make sure you
And
guys.
you're the oldest. You're kind of like one of the, you and Stan.
Stan, but yeah, Stan's not active anymore, so that leaves me as, and Norman Travis was another one of us, also from East St. Louis. He started I think Norman said, he met Mike Salmon about probably the same year I did, like 73, but Norman didn't start training this till 75. And his name's not as well known because, you know, here's a guy who got out of the Air Force. He was working for a railroad. He started a family, but he was training his sons. And I mean, you can't take anything away from this guy either. I mean, he was still doing it and he's continued to do it forever. But Norman, I believe Norman now is more working on, it's a Japanese samurai sword type of an approach. That's his thing, you know. He may still do some JKD classes out at Ron Smith's Muay Thai Academy, but he had, I think in the last couple of years and during COVID and stuff, he had to back off a little bit. But I just wanted to say there is still one other guy who goes way back with us to the 70s who may still be, I haven't talked to Norm lately, but he still may be doing some classes. But even if that's the case, there's still only two of us that came out of that original, two of us at most, who came out of that original East St. Louis bunch, who's still actively doing anything, you know. So yeah, just I wanted to give Norm his.
And honestly, remember, there may be people in backyards.
There's always people in backyards.
I went I'll tell you, when I lived in California, I lived in Bakersfield. I worked in a town called Delano. It was Hispanic and Filipino. The guys I worked for were Filipino, and they were taking backyard classes, and I was not allowed to go.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because we talked about Al Carter.
Yeah.
His stuff's mostly been in his garage.
Yep.
And this guy, you talk about a lot of real life experience, right? As a policeman, as a special security officer, Bosnia, Serbia,
United Nations,
united with the U.S. force. He was a special UN police officer there. Oh my God, he's got. But a lot of the guys that are the most serious. See, I went from being in a bigger commercial atmosphere. I have a studio built. I have a studio built in my basement, and then in warm weather, I'm like, Bruce, Art, we go out and train in a park. Because what happens? You don't have to focus on all the stuff you have to do to maintain a commercially viable, take every guy off the street, water your art down to make it palatable for people who aren't that serious. You know, you're going to find, I'm so happy you said that, more guys that are serious eliminate a lot of the business aspect of this, so they focus on the art and only working with people who are serious.
And you get to play. You get to have fun with it. You're right. You don't have to focus on anything else. And if a person doesn't want to do it, okay, bye.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Go play volleyball or something.
Find the art that works for you.
Or that.
Find the instructor that works for you.
If you're chasing the carrots that look like a black belt, you know, you're chasing those carrots, you want those belts. Well, ours ain't the place. That's the reason.
We can get you one for $19.99.
That's right. That's why, you know, a lot of the serious combat stuff, they got rid of all that crap because they know that it's such an arbitrary thing anyway. You can take two guys and they start on day one, and 10 years later, they're both trained as many hours. And be extremely different, no matter how much you try to make them look exactly the same based on that art's parameters. And they ain't going to be, no matter what. They have different bodies, they have different minds, they have different habits, they have, you know, so that's why all that's a bit of a joke. So that's kind of the inside joke with
I kind of look at it as like degrees: high school diploma, college diploma, PhD, master's. It's a diploma. What you do with it and how it works for you is different than everybody.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, Bruce, thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. So, guys, we'll get this up here soon, and some more food for thought.